He like lights up. Unless you watch it, you don't get the full real context. It's the same with the Ritchson answer. Like, you can sense he's like struggling to find the words, which basically tells you like, yeah, it probably is a possibility. It's like, look how uncomfortable he is when they're talking about the Cavill situation. He takes like a minute of basically being like, like, how do I do this? Like,
shout outs to Will Beats. I want to start like a review segment because he sees a lot of movies too. Hopefully he can watch the movies quick so that when we talk about it, it's already out. But I want to start with doing movie reviews, his movie reviews, when he sees movies and what he experienced and stuff like that. So I'm gonna be introducing that segment. But what up, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of the Nerd Gen Report. What's going on, Brian?
Not much, man. I should say a lot's going on in the DC world, but and Marvel, because Fantastic Four is rolling in this week. So this is a real litmus test time for the genre. I think we have cautiously optimistic news around Superman in terms of its box office legs, looking a little better heading through week 2 than it maybe looked like in week 1. And then Fantastic Four is going to see what it can do here. But, so we'll talk about some of the reaction to that. But, some cautious optimism there as well. So we'll see for the genre, but maybe looking like we're going to get through this okay. At least feeling good about the state of both, better about the state of both universes heading into next year and beyond. But I still think there's a lot of fallout and a lot of additional developments on the Warner Brothers DC front in light of the opening of Superman, how it's been received. And James Gunn, never one to shy away from the microphone or the keyboard, has been at it, dropping nuggets.
And like Kevin, when they speak, we gotta listen because that's the horse's mouth right there. And I've always been a proponent of really having conversations and seeing people, looking them in their eye and really getting a sense of understanding the meaning of it.
I will say this, to your point, we'll get into the James Gunn. There's a particular video YouTube interview that he did that we're going to talk about. As of now, Kevin Feige is a better poker player on camera than James Gunn is. If you watch Kevin, he basically, his tone of voice and his level of enthusiasm is kind of the same for stuff that's good and bad and stuff that's real versus fake or rumor. He's pretty good at sort of just keeping it in the same zone. James Gunn wears a little more of his emotion on his sleeve. I think if you watch interviews like this, he does betray some positivity, negativity, uncomfortable, like lack of comfort, degree of enthusiasm. He lets a little more of that out. So at least so far. We'll see if he gets more seasoned as a studio head, whether he learns to bury that. But that's my impression, at least, based upon things we've seen so far.
So, yeah, we want to get into that James Gunn conversation that he recently had with Happy Sad.
It's Josh Horowitz's YouTube channel. Yeah. Happy, Sad, but Confused.
It was an interesting conversation, man. And based on all of what you said in terms of James Gunn, when he speaks, you can tell that he really, like how we are in terms of when we discuss the genre and how passionate we are about seeing things and seeing things come to fruition in terms of how we want a character characterized, all that. This is what the show is about, is really getting to what really bothered us and some of the things that we really loved.
Well, so there's a lot, right? We had filed, there was a big Wall Street Journal feature on Warner Brothers and Superman before the movie came out. We referenced it briefly in our review, but there's content there, sort of more on the David Zaslav front. There's this James Gunn content. And then there's Superman itself, which is continuing to generate conversation of its own as it moves through the second weekend. So I think the tagline I would say is that we kind of got, I don't know, a formal announcement. There's been multiple articles basically saying Superman has done enough for Warner Brothers to green light kind of moving forward with the existing plans for the universe for the time being. So in that sense, you have to say Superman got the job done, at least in the eyes of the people that were that are for now writing the checks and making the decisions. So that's why we can talk about all this stuff, because there's sort of been a formal like, okay, you're good to keep going.
If this would have like floundered like really badly, like nobody came out because people are just tired, then I think it would have been an easy no, we're not doing this. But it did just enough, and people are curious enough to see what's next. Because with stuff like this, if it does okay, then there is hope for improvement.
Right? Absolutely.
So,
and there's obvious room for improvement here. So I don't know how long this show will wind up being. There's so many things, but the obvious room for improvement is that Superman's box office hold. Maybe this is a good place to start, just for basic discussion. Excellent box office hold in week 2. We talked about this, that basically there were 2 weeks, right? Superman, Fantastic Four. You had 2 weeks apart. Yeah, you had Smurfs, and I know what you did last summer in between. But come on, if Superman was good, you knew that that second weekend was going to belong to Superman. But it had to make its money.
What was the number?
Yeah, so remember, the opening weekend was 125 US, 220 global. That was the official. Second weekend is looking like it's going to be about 58, maybe even as high as 60 US. So about a little more than 50% decline. That's excellent for a big superhero movie, which would tend to have a front end loaded box office in week 1. So just by comparison, Man of Steel, week 2, the drop was over 65%. So that's usually you get down into that 65 to 70. That's indication that people didn't really like what they saw or were more iffy on it, didn't go out and tell all their friends, hey, you got to go see this. 50 to 55%, which is where this film is going to be, says pretty good word of mouth, like really solid. Like that's in line with like Deadpool and Wolverine's drop last year. That's right where you want to be as a franchise film. Is it, every once in a while you get the craziness, right? Like Avatar, Endgame, those movies don't drop that much, in the second weekend. Right. That's the aberration type stuff. You get like the 30% or the whatever. So 50, 55 is really solid. Global continues to be the issue. So this movie basically is mechanically holding to about 58 to 60% of the box office is coming from the US versus 40% non-US. So right there is the WB's mission. That cannot sustain for the next 10 years. You can't have Superman, which looks like it might end up with about $350 million US, which would be an excellent result. That would be really good. But it's still only going to be about 600, 650 overall because the international box office is dragging. That will be WB's challenge going forward. They want this to be global. It may not ever be able to get to the heights of 2018 and 2019 just because places like China just don't care about this genre anymore and don't support it. But you're still generally expecting the international to exceed the domestic for most of your projects at this point. So that's the room for improvement. But 350 US, there's not much room for improvement relative to expectation there. I think at the start of this whole assignment, if you had told David Zaslav you're going to get 350 million US at least out of your Superman film, he'd have signed up for it every single day of the week.
Shout outs to Freddie. He and I had a conversation. He thought it was going to be those type of numbers. Endgame type numbers. Avatar type numbers. Second, I was like, absolutely not. I said, well, 45 to 55%, I'll give you that range. So shout outs to Freddie. Because he knows that I said that. There's no way that you do not go see this movie. Why? Because this is an icon. You want to see what was done. You want to decide for yourself which Superman you are experiencing here. So this movie here seems to hold up because of all that it represents and it has represented in the past. So people are curious to see what it is outside of here. I don't know. We briefly touched on it in our previous episode in terms of the messaging of the movie. And we didn't really get into a sort of deeper meaning as to how it's reflecting in terms of his performance. Brian, what do you think is occurring?
I think this discussion has become one of the more fascinating misunderstandings I've seen about the facts of a movie in some time. And I'll try to explain what I mean by that. First off, I think James Gunn invited some of this storm on himself in a few ways. When he started making the press tour, and we highlighted one of the interviews where this first started to appear, was an international interview, but it started to come up in more of the US stuff too, where he basically called Superman an immigration story. And then he sort of went into like that immigration is a story of America. I actually genuinely don't believe he meant that comment as like a 100% politically charged comment, because I've heard the context in which he made it. I think he was framing it more as like, well, yeah, like if you like the history of America, Ellis Island, Statue of Liberty, like there's been a lot of people that have come here from other places and done things, but that was seized upon even before the movie came out. You know, you had former Superman Dean Cain getting involved. You had Fox News, right, calling this movie super woke before it came out. And then once it came out, and yes, when you're sitting there watching it, it's pretty obvious like what the characterizations are in one sense. However, I think this is where I think the misunderstanding comes in. People saw the Jaranpur Baravia stuff as, oh, that's Israel Gaza, or that's a mix of Israel Gaza and Russia Ukraine. And I know there was one thing I saw, like some big sort of fairly liberal or progressive person on Twitch who basically was like, this movie's awesome. It's 2 hours of F Israel. And like that went viral. So the movie has become in one sense very politically charged. But I have to be honest, the facts of the case don't necessarily lead me to believe that he meant it to be as politically charged as it has become. Like, I got the parallels immediately watching the movie, but I didn't find his proposed solution or the way the hero operates, I didn't necessarily find to be a fully political allegory. Because he's basically saying, I mean, all right, if we want to distill it down, he's basically saying, let's be nice. That's kind of what Superman's saying, right? Like, let's be nice. We're going to make mistakes because we're human. We do the best we can. And if we stay with that, things will work out. That's not exactly a ultra progressive answer to the problems that people seem to be seizing upon that this movie is commenting on. I don't know what your impression was of that when you were watching it.
But I think I mentioned sort of an analogy regarding when the kid is calling out for Superman, and in reality, like no one, no, there is no such thing, right? Right? And it just hits too close to home, I think. And it almost seems like it was intentional. You say something, but you didn't mean it like that. It was a misunderstanding, but this is the way it comes across.
But here's where the facts of the case become a little more muddy. People are reading this movie in real time. So they're seeing it in 2025 and they're seizing upon it as a commentary, as a 2025 commentary on events that have happened over the last 18 months. The problem with that narrative is that I actually did additional digging on this point because I wanted to get my dates straight. James Gunn turned in the final script for this movie in May of 2023. The bombing of Israel's music festival occurred on October 7th, 2023. Israel's response obviously comes afterwards. None of those things had occurred by the time the script for this movie was locked. And we know that there were minimal reshoots involved. I find it hard to believe that James Gunn rewrote the entire script or that part of the script after the events in Gaza that we've seen over the last 18 months played out. which means how, like, the fact that this looks a lot like that, is that just coincidence? Like, I don't know. I'm just saying the timing doesn't line up. He couldn't have had, in May of 2023, Donald Trump isn't president yet. And the attack that triggers the subsequent war hasn't happened yet. Those are facts. So unless you believe James Gunn altered the entire shooting script once those events had happened, there's simply no way that these depictions came after the current events people are connecting to the film. And that's the part where I feel like there seems to be some degree of misunderstanding. There is an element of this could be something that is unfortunately coincidental. Now, James Gunn's personal politics, yeah, he's a liberal. Like, we know that. Like, he's been pretty open about that. You know who else is liberal? 98.8% of Hollywood, pretty much, right? Like, where have you been for the last 50, like 100 years? So I'm not exactly surprised to see some left-leaning stuff in movies, because that's mostly what the people who make these movies are about. I mean, Charlton Heston and Clint Eastwood notwithstanding, but like, I just find it very fascinating that both sides of the political aisle have seized on this movie for their own purposes, but are neglecting what seems to be the big elephant in the room, which is like, facts. The timeline doesn't suggest he wrote it as a response to this, because those things hadn't happened yet. Now, where it also gets layered, and I got to throw this in there too, is the origins of Superman, the comic book character. I mean, you have to put this into discussion, right? I mean, Jerry Siegel and Joe Shuster, Jewish creators. There are people who believe that the entire mythos of Superman is an allegory for Israel. The idea of Superman as the golem protector of the Israeli people, and their journey from a dying land to a new home, and this character being the savior. I mean, that's been there since the 30s. So that's sort of like sitting there in the history of this character as well. But I'm struggling with, like I said, I'm struggling with the timeline. It looks a little bit more like strange, eerie alignment and coincidence than it does one director's mission to make a statement against the Trump administration or against Netanyahu. And I would say, to the box office point, I'd be curious as to your thoughts on this. The US numbers, which I would argue is where the politicization, you would argue, probably would be most felt, you're not really seeing that, right? It's not like you're seeing the box office skewing toward blue states over red states. You're kind of seeing pretty broad-based support across the country and pretty good word of mouth, and people are coming out. It's looking like a normal, like we talked about the last time, the ethnicity of the audience is pretty normal. Yeah, they lost some of the kids, and we talked about why with some of the content. But that's not because of this. They lost them because of, some of the language and some of the innuendo and some of the violence, like that one scene we've talked about, like the Russian roulette scene. But like, other than that, the U.S. box office breakdown, you wouldn't know this movie was political based on that. You wouldn't. So then it goes to non-U.S., right? That's where you're like, what happened here? And that part I can't totally dismiss. I mean, you can kind of break it down and just sort of like, there's the Asian component, which, like I said, Asian markets have not supported superhero movies by and large since Endgame. That's been a decreasing trend line for years. I don't think that has much to do with Superman individually, because you see that now with other films. Europe is the place where the question can be asked, because Europe has underperformed massively. And maybe there's some piece of, they've labeled Superman as like, he's the American hero, Truth, Justice, American Way. He's the American hero, and he's still the American hero. And, with trade relations being what they are, maybe, like, I don't know. I mean, I don't know that individual families make those decisions at that level all the time, but maybe. But I would point out to people who are like, well, they hate everything America right now. I mean, you just had a pretty crappy Captain America movie, which, by the way, and I have to throw this in there, statistically speaking, movies for international audiences that are frontlined by non-Caucasian leads, especially black leads, tend to underperform. And if you want to test my numbers, go look at Black Panther, which is the biggest, Black Panther made more money in the US than Infinity War did. Infinity War made 700 million more globally than Black Panther did. And if you're trying to tell me that who the lead of that movie was and the ethnic breakdown of that movie didn't have an impact on that, you're crazy. Look at Sinners. Huge box office success. That is like a 70-30 US international split. So my point is, you had a Captain America movie frontlined by a black actor with the word America in the title, and that movie with bad reviews still made more money overseas than it did in the US just a few months ago. And if you're going to tell me, well, Liberation Day came after that and that changed the entire tenor of the Europe-US relationship, I'm going to be like, yeah, okay, maybe. But like, you really didn't know, like Europe really didn't know what Trump was about from his first term? Like, come on. So my point is it a factor? Is it in the conversation? It absolutely is in the conversation. How much it's actually driving and determining the outcomes here, I think is a little more questionable. It's just hard. It's just like, it doesn't line up perfectly, even though I get totally what people are seeing and then saying as a result of it.
What was the title of our video that will divide audiences?
Well, we've been right about that. I don't care what, like, you can talk about success. You can talk about, like, don't tell me there's no division, because this movie's being talked about all sorts of different ways, right?
And that's why I've delayed some of the other videos that we have that I'm gonna put out to midnight tonight. I'm gonna put out the Void episode, good episode, different episode. But this has been the discussion, the numbers, and what it means.
And like I said, there's information, there's misinformation. I think there's misunderstanding on this particular point, which was important to talk about. I think if you want a hilarious old school takedown of this movie, legendary New York sportscaster Mike Francesa devoted an entire episode of his show to reviewing Superman. He hates the movie. It's an absolutely hilarious. If you know anything about Mike and the Mad Dog from Sports Radio archives, it is a hilarious rant at the movie. I don't agree with a lot of what he said, but it's just, if you want to hear some, a stuck in time view of Superman and sort of the characterizations and what someone who's, in a different generation wants to see from the Superman, it will at least entertain you. Put it that way.
Yeah. And again, I don't see how you don't see this movie if you're a comic book fan knowing the history of Superman. You go see this movie, maybe once, maybe twice, right? This is one of those movies you go see just to see how it affects you the second go around, right?
Yeah, I've seen it 3 times now. So yeah, I actually think the most overt messaging plot point of Superman is getting no discussion. The one I think James Gunn was most intentional about, that I found a little off-putting, is the monkeys. That's the one where he's basically saying all this garbage online that's propagated by a bunch of monkeys. Man, he insulted a lot of people. That is, and I feel like that's kind of hypocritical, because I'm like, you never met a tweet you didn't like. Like, you love getting down and interacting with everybody. But like that scene where I saw it, was like, oh, that's pretty on the nose, considering you're a pretty online guy and you're basically trashing all these people, saying there's so much garbage that's put out online by a bunch of people who might as well be monkeys. Like, I'm like, that's getting no play. No. And ironically, all the people are going out online and spouting about this movie. Right. So I don't know, that one's getting lost in the shuffle, but I actually think that one was very purposeful.
Yeah. There was a lot of questionable decisions, man. Like they were having discussions similar to the discussions we had about some of the things that we didn't like, Brian. The Lex thing, playing the Russian roulette thing, I found like Guy Gardner talking to us, not saying a word. All those things, I would have been like, let's say, for example, the Russian roulette. We already are exploring some sort of technology that creates pocket dimensions. So obviously Lex is dealing with high tech. I'll make a comparison to this. Homecoming. Keaton's Vulture, when he shoots the guy and the guy like disintegrates or something like that.
Oh yeah.
Why doesn't Lex have? Why does he have? Why couldn't he like? I'll send him to
I,
another dimension. I don't know where. You know what I'm saying?
it's, a,
And Superman can
it's a great
always
point.
think about that dude that went to another dimension. Who knows what he attempts to do to try to save that person? It could be something that happens, but he's always thinking about it, and it opens up a bigger thing in the future.
You're 100% right. Your point is incredibly well taken for the accessibility of that scene to more audiences. Why does he have to use a revolver and shoot him point blank as like effectively? Again, it's one of those things that draws people to like, is this a hostage? Are you making an allegory to an actual hostage situation? You have a white billionaire with a gun shooting, what looks to be sort of someone of Arab descent. That's what people are going to seize on. And you're right, like it is Lex, and it's kind of the Star Wars of it all, because like if you think about one of the beautiful innovations of George Lucas back in the day, it's that the blaster, right? There's no blood. You can shoot all these stormtroopers, and it's like they just go down. They just go down in a heap. So like kids don't get traumatized by like a cauterized laser wound going through these guys. They just get hit by the laser and they go down. And you're right. So Lex would have some kind of super weird futuristic tech that could kill the guy without it seeming graphic or disturbing. And my kid was disturbed. I covered her eyes, and she was still like traumatized for like 30 seconds after, because she could hear what was
Kids
going
having
on.
I think we underestimate what our kids are listening to and how they're interpreting things, right? And again, when you listen to James Gunn and his decision making on certain scenes, there's so many ways you can.
It's a job that calls for tact, finesse, imagination.
That you can finesse it so it doesn't seem that impactful. For the P word, he could have implied that he was going to say it, and Superman, knowing what he was going to say, stopped him from saying it and saying, hey, they're kids. That's it. That's how you fix it.
Yeah.
That's it. You move on. But no, you wanted to actually say it. These are the decision makings. These are the things, Brian, that we say, and a lot of people say, based on comments that we've gotten, about how Gunn is incapable of going and doing Gunn things. And it doesn't work, yo. This is not Peacemaker. Don't make a lesser version of Peacemaker, yo.
Yep.
Because they're in the same world, but I can't imagine people letting their kids listening to Peacemaker or watching Peacemaker or even making that connection to Peacemaker.
Yeah. No, it's the polarizing nature of Gunn himself as an artist. I mean, that's the thing. It's like, to me, I always find the parallels and the ironies here, in the sense of, we spent all these years breaking down the DCEU with Snyder at the controls, and he's an incredibly polarizing filmmaker. And in some ways, Gunn has navigated the approval rating of critics certainly more consistently, but he certainly has his detractors as well creatively. And so he, in some ways, is also divisive. It's just different divisive. So it's interesting that you have that. Now, that being said, like I said, this movie looks like it will get the job done commercially, and on we go. And now, the Gunn stewardship will remain intact, and we'll see more of his sensibilities. Maybe we'll see less, depending on which filmmaker is making which movie. So I think that's probably a good segue into, some of the content that's out there, say in the Wall Street Journal feature and this Gunn interview with Josh Horowitz that we want to talk about.
We should look into putting some. That's what I'm gonna do with that extra $200. I'm gonna do a promotion on one of our older Ritchson conversation. That's what I have to do, yo. Because what have we been talking about for?
Anyway, you want to go to the Gunn video interview? So, of course, James Gunn sits down with Josh Horowitz, and Josh Horowitz gets a lot of stars and directors. It's a really entertaining conversation that he usually has. As with all things, Pablo, in order to go to the future, we have to go to the past and what might have been, in one of the most uncomfortable and then subsequently F it, I'm just going to take this guy to the mat, pun intended. Horowitz asked him what happened with Henry Cavill. And you got to watch the part of the interview because all the articles will give you the quote. They will not give you James Gunn moving like there's 100 termites under, like ants under his seat. He is so uncomfortable because he's like, what do I say? He like literally takes like 30 seconds before he even starts answering the question.
Yeah,
because
so he was like,
what's coming.
I gotta find a way to say this. I gotta find a way to how to put this.
And he is so nice, and he says the nicest things about Cam because Horowitz basically says, see, this is good interviewing. I think Horowitz knew some of the answer before he asked it, but he's like, how difficult was it to make that call? And Gunn immediately is like, no. We sat down with him. Like he basically is like, no. Like we didn't call him. And he has to explain why. He's like, out of courtesy to him, out of respect for him, we have to sit down with him. But here's the quote. Well, because he respects Henry Cavill. Whether he respects the other person in this equation remains to be seen. But he says, believe it or not, the day we were dealing with trying to think about it, the day we were dealing with trying to figure out if we could take the job at DC Studios, the day the deal closed, all of a sudden they were announcing that Henry was back. And I was like, what is going on? We know what the plan is. The plan is to come in and do Superman. So it was really unfair to Henry and a total bummer. First end quote. What did we tell you?
It was as if we were the doom flies, that we were in there and listening to what. It was as if we were there. We took what happened? What happened after that?
In seven Bucks headquarters?
Yeah. What happened?
We were in Seven Bucks headquarters.
What did Henry Cavill do after that? That you said?
Yeah, well, he puts out. So we had said at the time he puts out this online announcement saying that he's back as Superman after having done the Black Adam credit scene. And we have said all along that was a Rock and $7 engineered strong arm tactic. Hey, Henry, go public with this. It'll put pressure on the studio. The response will be enormous. Look at my following. Look at your following. They can't say no to you if you do this. James Gunn's comment is telling you that's exactly what happened.
Mentality situation here, yo. That's not how you work, yo. And Henry Cavill, being a nice guy, did it.
He got played. He's the jobber. He got played.
Are you kidding me, yo?
Yeah. So then here's Gunn's second quote. And remember, he is so uncomfortable. That's the thing. The quote doesn't do justice to how he's like struggling to get some of these words out. There was a vacuum at the time, and a lot of people were ... trying to be as diplomatic as possible ...
Yeah.
That's a quote. That's part of the quote. I'm not adding that. That's part of the quote. I'm just that's to characterize how uncomfortable he is. There were other people that had a take on what they wanted to do at DC and were trying to force their way. And it was never part of the equation for David Zaslav. So we came in, and that, meaning Cavill, was really unfortunate. So I'm like, this poor guy.
Yo, go back to our shows, man. Really, like, go back to our shows called Rock Moves. If you haven't seen them, watch them. You can just go Rock Moves, Nerd J Report, and you'll see the storyline that we painted, yo. And you'll be like, oh, snap.
As we know, after this, Henry Cavill fires.
What did Brian
$7
say
as his agent? And we predicted.
We'll know
what
really happens if he fires his agent. And Brian said if he fires his agent. And this is before it happened. And then, when it happened, oh my! Again, it was another George Foreman. It happened.
It happened. It happened.
So Gunn closes by saying he's very diplomatic in truth to Cavill. He says, so Peter and I said the right thing to do was sit down with Henry and talk to him. He was an absolute gentleman and a great guy about it. And he said, the only thing I ask is I'm able to reveal it myself as opposed to it coming from you guys. And I'm like, that's a class act. And then he said, would it preclude Cavill being in the DC universe as another character? And Gunn said, absolutely not. No, I talked to him about it on that day. I would love to put Henry in something. Yes. End quote.
I know the perfect role for Henry Cavill. Perfect. Brian, when I say perfect, it's a no-brainer, Brian. Tell me what you think about The Question.
Oh, yeah, he could definitely do that.
Yes.
Now, here's the question. Would Henry Cavill hide his face?
Exactly.
Because I think that would be the twist, right? He's a handsome guy, like he then disfigures and hides his face. You can hear him
sort of just watch Man from U.N.C.L.E., right? You'll get sort of the vibes. But here's the thing, Brian. The Question is implying or has conspiracy theories about what's going on in the DCU. He discovers things and he can be the vehicle in terms of helping us, filling us in on what's happening around us.
That would be interesting. I don't hate it. I don't know if he would take it, but I don't know. I don't hate it at all. Now we got to layer in a little bit of David Zaslav here because James Gunn never names Dwayne Johnson, but I mean, my God, that is a savaging of The Rock. That is as off the top rope against The Rock as you've seen by a studio executive. Because remember, even that feature, that takedown feature of The Rock and his work ethic and how he acted on set, like nobody put their name on that. Remember, that was a he said, she said about him. James Gunn he's sitting there on camera and there's no question who he's talking about.
I'm gonna just let other people talk about it.
And he's just going at him. I don't think we've heard the last of that. I think it's still because there's so much Superman stuff out there right now and Fantastic Four is coming. I think that piece of news is actually going to continue to grow because it's like in the middle of the interview. It's not even like it's like you have to watch the whole thing and then it's like whoa, that's in there, So I think this is going to take on a life of its own and hasn't fully exploded. Now, the Journal, Wall Street Journal, to provide a little context before we go to the future, David Zaslav, in the wake of. Warner Brothers and then David Zaslav in the wake of the Snyderverse universe starting to crumble. Now, this is really interesting. So they do BVS in 2016, Justice League in 2017. We all know what happened. You check other shows for that. Warner Brothers tried to poach Feige. The Journal article confirms they called him in 2017, so before Endgame. And they had a meeting to try to pull him, and he did not leave. So that's an interesting tidbit about timing.
They realize Endgame is possibly at that point Kevin Feige had created a phenomenon. And this is the Endgame. This is the capping of that, right? You had No Way Home and stuff like that, but they figured let's call Kevin Feige because this could be the moment we can do this. This could be the only moment we can do this. Or we wait for him to go down the road that he's been on right now, and we can get him cheaper. Or we start our own thing. And get James Gunn and Peter Safran.
But in between, when David Zaslav comes in as part of the Discovery merger, and he starts looking at how to rebuild the DC universe, the first thing that the Journal article says is he basically changes, I'm going to use this word very carefully, he changes the hierarchy of power within Warner Brothers to make the corporate organization around DC look the way Feige has it at Marvel. So he streamlines it. He gets rid of a lot of the mid-level voices that had been in there and basically says, I want heads. I want people at the top. Everything flows from them, right? Simplicity.
A parliament. Go ahead.
And then he starts setting up meetings around town with people on how to fix DC. And according to the Journal, David Zaslav calls a meeting with Dwayne Johnson. as one of those people. So Zaslav brings The Rock into the building, which then leads to, after all those years of The Rock teasing Black Adam, The Rock finally makes Black Adam. What it tells me, and I think you'd agree, and why I said that hierarchy of power line, is that when The Rock was out there promoting Black Adam and talking about the hierarchy of power, he was doing so unironically. He, based upon the conversations that Zaslav had invited him into, it says to me he made the movie as like a Trojan horse to get control of the entire studio. And that's what he believed was about to happen. And that's why he promoted the movie in the way he did. And so when he said the hierarchy of power is about to change, that is a literal tagline. He believed he was going to walk out of this movie with a hit, and he and $7 would be calling the shots for the studio. And the Journal article has one sentence that says, those talks ended after the DC movie Black Adam flopped, end quote.
Put all the positive spins you want. Numbers don't lie. And because of the numbers, you make decisions.
Which leads to Gunn and Safran, which leads to this piece of the Horowitz podcast where The Rock makes one last power play as Gunn and Safran, because he knows, I'm sure at that point, that Gunn and Safran are coming in. And he makes one last attempt with this Cavill social media play to strong arm the studio. So he uses Henry Cavill, literally uses him, to try to get his version of the DC universe over at the last minute when he senses he's losing control. Which leads to Cavill firing his agent and severing ties with $7 and leads to the DCU that we have now. That's the proper and accurate history, which we kind of have sensed, but there it is, like in reputable print sources.
Brian, if I'm at a loss for words, it's because I've said what I've said. There's no need to repeat it. When people talk to me about Superman, they're like, oh, here, go watch my show. I don't want to talk about it already. I already did. For what? For what? Watch the show. You want to know what I got to say? Watch the show.
Yeah, it is fun. It is fun. It is fun. And that all is that is the foundation upon which we now move forward. It is important to have all that in hand because that's, Superman succeeding now to the degree that it has, which is not stratospheric heights, but enough that it will probably make a little bit of money. It's been received generally well. Yeah, we talked about the divisions, but again, we say numbers don't lie, right? Critical response in the 80s, audience response in the 90s, cinema score A-. Those are checking the boxes for what you need. And now Gunn starts to talk about the future. So, Batman, you want to talk about Batman? Because this was my other favorite part of this video cast that I think has to be watched.
That's why I know we're so so much down. We're not even at the bottom of the total point.
Then there's 50 feet of crap. And then there's us.
Yeah, talk about it. There's rich teams, then there's poor teams.
All right.
Then there's 50 feet of crap, and then there's us.
I can sense the conversation, what it would be like with James Gunn talking about this stuff, man, because what have I've been saying about Alan Ritchson? If you want to know, go back to the shows. We've said what we've said about Alan Ritchson being the perfect embodiment of Batman.
There are 3 parts Batman in this interview. Again, watch it because the body language is different than the quote. Josh Hartnett specifically asks him about Alan Ritchson being fan cast as Bruce Wayne. And again, James Gunn, incredibly uncomfortable silence. Like he's literally just like almost looking at the ceiling. It's like it's so telling. He's like searching, like how do I? And then he says, "I am a big Alan Ritchson fan, both as an actor and a guy. So let's just wait to see what happens." End quote. I mean, that is the biggest non-denial that you'll ever hear of a fan casting that I've ever heard.
There are some things, listen, that I can vibe with him in terms of the decisions that he makes in terms of the look and style or whatever the case may be, right? But he knows what he sees. Like, listen, and I'm not saying it to my own horn. It's like, but when I saw David Corey Sweat in that movie, in that show on Netflix called Hollywood, go if y'all want to go see when it came out. And when I saw him, I was like, that's Superman right there. But it was Henry Cavill time. Nobody wanted to hear about nobody else. But for me, when I saw him, I was like, oh, snap. And Alan Ritchson is, yo, do you not understand Alan Ritchson is the guy, yo? If you haven't watched Reacher, and it's crazy, shout out to Will Beats. He hasn't watched Reacher yet. I told him, yo, watch Reacher and it'll answer any questions you may have.
Yeah.
We don't have to get into a long conversation as to why Alan Ritchson is the perfect Batman. We don't have to get in. You can watch my shows or watch that show, and it'll answer any and all questions.
So I think I take from the response, he's in play. Like whether or not he is the choice, we don't know yet. But Alan Ritchson, this is not a 0% chance. Like, definitely, he is one of the people that James Gunn is looking at, maybe, and probably has had conversations with about the idea of the take and what they want to do with it. So I think this, similar to history repeating itself, similar to Christian Bale 20 plus years ago, I think there is a real chance that the fan casting of this role might turn out to be the role. So we'll have to wait and see, fingers crossed. Now, second Batman tidbit that I thought was fascinating. Horowitz asked Gunn, is Brave and the Bold? He goes, Brave and the Bold is where he literally asked, like, Brave and the Bold is where we're going to see DCU Batman show up first, right? And Gunn cuts him off and says, no, I'm not willing to say that. Cuts him off in the question. No, I'm not willing to say that. So, which leads to the, I know he's saying it's not world's finest, but it leads to the, that's a pretty strong indication that there's some talk of where exactly DCU Batman should drop in. And it may not be in this Damian Wayne Brave and the Bold story was officially announced as part of Chapter 1. And I don't think James Gunn is counting his animated one clip in Creature Commandos as that. He's talking about the live action actor of Batman. And he's basically hinting it will be somewhere else.
Yeah, when I read that, it's not world's finest, whatever, man. If you don't want to call it that, don't call it that.
He also said it's not Batman versus Superman. Thank God.
Thank God. Thank goodness. There's not no dumb stuff like that. We got titles for stuff, man. Get creative here.
Last Batman tidbit. I think the written press has this one wrong because he was asked about Matt Reeves' Batman Part 2. And if you look at a lot of the articles are running with the studio is quote unquote thrilled with the script, and that James Gunn is thrilled, happy with the script. His answer in this video interview to me with the body language, if you watch it, is much more nuanced. Quote, I like it, talking about the script. For sure, we're headed in the right direction. There are some things we still got to work out, but it's headed in the right direction, for sure, end quote. Pablo, that's ominous to me. He's basically saying, I have notes. Like, yeah, that's okay as a starting point, but we got to talk before this thing goes in front of the camera. That's what it sounds to me like. There's still some stuff here between him and Reeves that needs to get worked out about DCU Batman versus this Batman.
Absolutely. And we've been hinting on that for a while, quite some time. I'm not going to sit here and get into my deep thoughts because I've already expressed them. We've talked about this already, of what could be sort of putting a pause in terms of the moving forward of Matt Reeves' vision, and whether or not it sort of puts James Gunn's vision and alters it, which it looks like James Gunn is the type of dude that's gonna get his way with especially now, the squirrel scene should tell it all with that. He's gonna get his way.
again, this is not about James Gunn and Matt Reeves not liking each other as people. This is about the creative. This is about it. And he even then said it's highly unlikely you would ever see something like Batman Part 2 and a DCU Batman movie being released in the same calendar year. There is, I'm telling you, there is a character, a story bit. There is something in the Batman Part 2 that Matt Reeves wants to use as part of his trilogy arc that James Gunn also wants to use or wants to have on the shelf unused for when it very well could be. But it just tells me there is this thing in this arc where the DCU and the Elseworlds are colliding, and James Gunn is like, I just don't want the overlap. Can we find a workaround? And Matt Reeves is like, Matt Reeves is going to be sitting there being like, your Superman is going to make 650. My Batman made 770. I should get that. I mean, there's a little bit of that. Like, why shouldn't I get my way on this? It's Elseworlds.
We're having Corleone Solazzo conversations right now. That's what's happening. This is the conversation. And what did he say to him? As long as your business doesn't interfere with my business.
That's also going to head to
And a man in my position can't afford to be made to look ridiculous.
That was in part 2 when he's talking to Al Pacino. But it was the Hollywood director. He was saying, and yeah, it was the Hollywood. I'll put it in the scene. What else, Brian?
Wonder Woman. See, this is, again, I think you got to watch him because James Gunn absolutely lights up when the subject of Wonder Woman comes out. He gets super excited. And he's like, yeah, we're further along than you think. Like, it's happening. Like, we've got, and then it asks, like, he basically gives like yes or no answers and starts laughing. But they're basically like, do you have a story in mind? Yes. Do you have a take and a way into the character that's different than we've seen? Oh, yes. Like, he's just like grinning from ear to ear. I'm fascinated. This is coming faster than Batman. He even said, like, DCU Batman is further off than you think. Wonder Woman is closer than you think.
We had a low point with Wonder Woman in 1984. So we can only get better and different. And that's easier to pull off. Batman is something tender, and you got to treat it like opening the National Treasure. When they're opening the Declaration of Independence, you got to be very careful.
I got you. I agree.
Very careful. So, but Wonder Woman is a bit of a different situation because of the opportunity it presents right now.
Yeah.
The opportunity represents right now to getting Adria Arjona as Wonder Woman is huge. This could bring her up there, Brian, because she's on her way. She's on her way, and this could catapult her into other roles. Carmen Sandiego, are you kidding me? There's so many routes you can go.
So not in this interview, but James Gunn threw gas on the Adria Arjona fire recently, where he literally says she would make a great Wonder Woman. And then he followed her on social media right after that. And then was like, oh, well, we have a past professional relationship. I think this is like, if you're laying odds, she's definitely minus odds now as a favorite.
Brian, you know what that is when they start following you? Listen, social media is the place for you to look your best. That is the method of screening being used to see if this guy would fit or whatever it is this the look we want? Let's get her in here. Obviously, there's going to be others just to get a feel and it's sort of the Wonder Woman that they like best. When they go with somebody else, we're surprised, right? If they go with somebody else, Brian, if it's not Alan Ritchson, let's say they get these other guys, Brandon Sklenar, let's say they get him. Who
would not do a bad job? I'm not. He is Indiana Jones more than he's Bruce Wayne, but he would not be bad.
This is the beauty of casting. You're in there to to hear the nuances, to hear Batman and to see him right there. If they were to go with somebody else, I would have to trust. Because again, like we've said before, James Gunn has done a tremendous job in casting them. But
so far, yeah, he's been good.
He's seeing Ritchson, Adrian Arjona is just he sees the same thing we see, Brian. He sees the same potential.
Although I keep saying in the back of my mind, like, and we're getting really far afield. But so the Arjona thing, I still can't believe how young she is, because the way she's made up in Andor, I feel like maybe makes her look. Actually, you know what it is? It's the way she gets beat up in Andor. She said such a tough show that I never thought for a second she was like 30 or 31. But she's not that old at all. So she has a long runway to play this character if she gets the role. I agree with you. Gunn seems to be laying that groundwork, and I still maintain, as much as he has publicly said he'll never do a superhero movie, that given that he's a Warner Brothers guy, I think if they build the universe, I think if they get enough pieces in place, I think Chalamet will sit down to do the meeting for Robin. If he's the lead, if he gets to play like a lead Robin and it's a true 1-1A, I think he's sitting there as like they can get that meeting because of the studio relationship if they've made a few projects that have succeeded and they've got the right director to pitch him on it. I think he would consider breaking his rule. At which point you're like, that's why I was texting you. I was like, from a casting perspective, it's like we might have this DC world where it's like Corn Sweat's doing his Superman and Brosnahan's Lane and Holtz obviously exceeded expectations as Luthor, and like we get Ritchson as Batman and Arjona as Wonder Woman and Chalamet as Robin, and you got Mr. Terrific and you got Aaron Pierre as Jon Stewart. You're like, Marvel ain't drafting no roster better than that in the next 10 years.
Absolutely not. The only way it gets interesting when we actually reset and we're replacing certain characters, because you got to have the core, right? You can't go on with Marvel without Captain America, Iron Man, Incredible Hulk. With this is the Avengers here. We can't have them completely different. We got to reset it.
I hear you, but that's a happening list. There's a good mix of like already arrived A-listers with like people already have awards on their shelf, with like people who, as you said, like the Pierres, the Arjonas, who are about to just explode as megastars for the next 10, 20. Like, I mean, we're getting way ahead of ourselves, but some of these are already in the studio, right? We already know some of them are already on the board, and you're kind of like, as you said, you walk out of Superman. I said the biggest positive is just you got good performances and good casting most of the way up and down. And you're just like, if nothing else, universes tend not to suck when you have good casting, good actors delivering good performances. Only so bad the movies can be. But if you've got Alec Guinness and Harrison Ford, like if they're the ones, and James Earl Jones, if they're the ones delivering silly lines, you will buy them all day.
It's not escapism, man. And they're doing a hell of a job in what we would think casting situation, and the look of how this could be is exciting.
Speaking of exciting, Gunn threw another tidbit in the Clayface arena, and he confirmed everything he says about it. I'm just like, he confirmed. He's like, yep, going in front of the camera, super excited. He's like, it's as if I've got a Blumhouse horror movie, and I've just set it in the DC universe. I'm like, say no more.
That's it.
Say no more. That's it.
What have we been talking about, bro?
That will hook people. You don't need to say anything else. That's the one sentence. Like, that's it. You walk in the studio meeting, I got a Blumhouse horror movie, but it's set in the DC universe. I mean, all the producers are looking around and be like, getting the checkbook out. Like, what do you want for that? And they're like, oh, I don't need that much money because it's a low budget horror. They're like, definitely go.
Yeah.
Like, go make that. He also seems fired up on Supergirl. That one's done, right? So they're in post-production. So that one's finished. So he was able to talk about that. And he's like, it's a really good movie. He's like, it's really well done. He's like, Millie Alcock kills it. And then, of course, he's like Jason Momoa as Lobo. He's like born to play it. You won't believe how fun it is and how awesome it is. Like, nothing that we didn't know.
Yeah.
But
Well,
he's like, this movie is excellent.
Tom King what's his role in this?
Well, obviously he's the author of the original comic. He's like the
Conciliary.
Yeah, he's like exactly what he is. He's the conciliary he's like he's like more the parliament. He's like the head of the parliament, and then Gunn sits on top of that as the prime minister. You know, kind of that's.
And
the
who's
way
directing this?
Craig Gillespie, art house director. Tanya. He did the GameStop movie, Dumb Money. So yeah, smaller budget, usually critically acclaimed. He's been nominated for a few awards. This is definitely a different genre for him, but in some ways that makes it more interesting because this is not James Gunn's visual style or not James Gunn's language in the script. It's different. So
remember my prediction.
That is, you would get good odds on that. If I could find you a polymarket prop on that, you would get 10-1 at least. I think that would happen.
I'll put some money on that.
Yes.
Man. I'll put some money on
Given
that.
the history, yes, you would. Yeah.
Anything else?
No, I think we covered it for DC. Superman and DC in an hour, but it's kind of the talk of the town, right? I mean, it's been a lot. Some unintended, some intended, but sounds to me like we should be on the lookout for a Wonder Woman casting announcement pretty imminently. That's my other take. Sounds very close.
He's ready to move. He's been given the green light, and so he's moving.
So Pillars, Superman's first, Supergirl's second, Wonder Woman in third, and they saved the big man for the end. Batman. That's what it sounds like. Which, by the way, is the right move. I know we were talking about like the comparisons to the Snyderverse. Which, by the way, is the right move. I know we were talking about like the comparisons to the Snyderverse. You have 4 pillars, but you have one that's unshakable, unbreakable. And he should come in last, if you can at all help it. And I think James Gunn bought himself the right to do that with Superman doing well enough. I think if Superman had been poorly received and the box office was weak, I think the panic and the panic move back to Batman would have recurred again. Now it feels like maybe James Gunn has enough in the pocket to say like, yeah, let's hold this. Hold this for one more year. Hold this for a little longer. Batman comes in last, comes in biggest, and we're off and running. Last question. Where else? So, okay. If James Gunn is teasing, it's not in Brave and the Bold, but he's coming somewhat soon in the DCU. If you were laying odds for where Batman is going to show up, DCU live action Batman first makes an appearance, and it's not Brave and the Bold. Where is it?
The next Superman.
Supergirl.
Not in Supergirl.
Oh, I think it's sooner than that, though.
Okay, yes. All right. Clayface?
That's probably my betting favorite,
yes.
Right? Batman universe villain.
Yes. Clayface.
And it's DCU Clayface, not Elseworlds. We were told that. So
yes. And that is... What?
That's gold. That's gold, Jerry. That's gold.
Take it. It's yours.
So that was my thought when he said that.
This is going to be...
they'll sneak it into that movie.
Yo. This is going to be phenomenal.
It's good business, right? We talked about Momoa and Supergirl. That's good business, right? So I don't think they necessarily need Batman and Clayface for Clayface to make money. But if they drop him in for 2 seconds, once just like something at the end as a hint that he's out there monitoring and about to get involved, like that will go viral. That will make that movie appointment viewing for people.
This is how you do it. You see a piece of Clayface in a sort of box or whatever, being electrocuted or whatever, experimented on. And there's a pan in, and then you see Batman's sort of eyes looking at what's happening with the thing, and you cut out. But you don't see you only see his eyes. You can see his figure just looking.
Yes, you don't have to give away the actor yet.
Or you can see his hands or whatever. Anything Batman, yo, just tease it, yo, and it's enough for my money. Please hit that like. It doesn't cost anything. Share with your friends. Comment in the comment section below, and we will see you next time on the Nerd Gym Report.